My name is Michael, and I'm 28 years old. A deep silence settled over our home after Grandpa Arthur passed. He was our anchor, our quiet wisdom. His absence left a hollow echo in his old Vermont farmhouse. His death, though expected, felt like a sudden chord, leaving nervous tension, a hum like a violin string at breaking point. It was a silent prelude. Adding to this unease was a peculiar inheritance, a small, tarnished brass key tucked into an envelope with my name in his shaky hand. No note. No explanation. Just the key. My mind wrestled with its purpose. Hidden safe? Attic chest? Something else? We'd explored his house. No secret seemed possible. This silent, enigmatic object became a persistent whisper, a riddle demanding an answer. My mother, Sarah, tried to ease my worry. "Your grandpa was always eccentric, honey," she'd murmured, voice rough with grief, seeing me turning the key. "Maybe it's just symbolic, or for something long gone." But Arthur didn't deal in vague symbols. He was a man of precise actions, of hidden meanings that always revealed themselves. This felt different. It was a deliberate, tantalizing mystery. Now, in the somber waiting room of Mr. Henderson's law office, surrounded by family, the key felt impossibly heavy in my pocket. The worn armchair creaked, amplifying the thick tension. Mr. Henderson moved slowly behind frosted glass. Each paper rustle, each distant cough tightened the knot in my stomach. I could almost hear the grandfather clock ticking, counting down to the revelation and the answer to my perplexing key. The heavy oak door finally opened, and Mr. Henderson emerged, his face a carefully neutral mask. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic as he gestured us in. My mother, Sarah, squeezed my arm briefly, a silent reassurance as we followed. The room inside was smaller, lined with shelves overflowing with leather-bound books, smelling faintly of old paper and dust. A large polished mahogany table dominated the center, and it was there, on its dark surface, that my eyes immediately locked onto a small, unassuming wooden box. It was a simple thing, unadorned, perhaps 8 inches square, but my heart began to hammer. Could it be? Was this the destination for Grandpa Arthur's enigmatic key? We settled into the high-backed chairs, the scraping of wood on wood echoing in the quiet. My Aunt Eleanor, always the pragmatic one, sat stiffly, her purse clutched tight. My Uncle Thomas, more outwardly mournful, dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. I could feel their collective anticipation, but mine was different, sharp, almost painful. It wasn't about inheritance or possessions for me. It was about understanding. The key felt like a burning coal in my palm, a silent question demanding to be voiced. I glanced at Sarah. Her gaze was fixed on Mr. Henderson, a mixture of grief and weariness etched on her features. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, the sound unusually loud in the hushed room. He adjusted his spectacles, picked up a thick document, and began to read, his voice a low, measured drone. I, Arthur Pendleton Davies, being of sound mind and body. The formal words felt strangely detached from the vibrant, quirky man I had known. My mind drifted, half listening to the legal jargon, half obsessed with the small wooden box sitting innocently on the table. Was it locked? Did it have a keyhole that matched the one in my pocket? Every mention of a specific item or family member felt like a detour, a frustrating delay from the singular mystery that consumed me. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. He read out bequests of land, antique furniture, even Grandpa Arthur's collection of vintage maps. My Aunt Eleanor nodded approvingly at a mention of a rare first-edition book, while Uncle Thomas sighed audibly at the passing of a cherished family heirloom to a distant cousin. I waited, holding my breath for my name, for the key, for the box. The air grew thick with unspoken thoughts, a strange mix of relief, mild disappointment, and muted gratitude from around the table. My own patience was wearing thin, replaced by a growing knot of anxiety. What if the box was a red herring? What if the key was for something entirely unrelated, something I'd never find? Finally, Mr. Henderson paused, his eyes lifting from the document. He looked directly at me. "And to my grandson, Michael," he announced, his voice gaining a slightly more personal cadence. "I leave the contents of this box, along with the key to unlock it, which I understand has already been delivered to him personally." A collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Eleanor's jaw dropped. All eyes swiveled to me, then to the box. The sudden attention was overwhelming, but also a profound relief. The riddle was real. The key had a purpose. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, the brass key suddenly vibrating with unspoken stories. My hand, still trembling slightly, found the cool, smooth brass of the key in my pocket. All eyes were on me, a weight I hadn't anticipated. Aunt Eleanor's gaze was a laser, intense with a mix of suspicion and insatiable curiosity. My mother, Sarah, squeezed my arm again, a silent push of encouragement. Mr. Henderson, with an almost imperceptible nod, seemed to confirm the moment was mine. The quiet hum of the room, previously filled with the drone of legal terms, now vibrated with a shared anticipation. It was as if the air itself held its breath, waiting. I pulled the key free, its polished surface catching the faint light from the window. It felt solid, ancient, a tiny anchor to Grandpa Arthur. Slowly, I extended my hand towards the wooden box, its simplicity belying the profound weight of this moment. It was even plainer up close, just unvarnished wood, joined with simple dovetail joints. No markings, no names, just the small brass keyhole perfectly centered on its front. My fingers grazed the smooth wood, and a faint scent, like old cedar and distant spice, wafted up. It smelled like his workshop, a place of quiet creation. "Michael, are you going to open it?" Aunt Eleanor's voice, sharp with impatience, cut through the hush. She adjusted her spectacles, her gaze fixed on the box as if it held the secrets to the universe, not just my grandfather's final message. There was a palpable shift in the room, from formal mourning to a more personal, almost urgent curiosity. My mother, Sarah, reached across the table, her hand finding mine. "Go on, sweetheart. Your grandpa had a reason for everything." Her voice, though still tinged with grief, held a new, hopeful note. She knew, as I did, that Arthur didn't act on whims. This was deliberate. Mr. Henderson nodded gently. "Indeed, Michael. The will specifies that the box should be opened immediately, in the presence of all parties. Please proceed." His professional calm was a stark contrast to the swirling emotions in the room, grounding the moment in its legal necessity. I swallowed, the lump in my throat surprisingly large. "Right," I managed, my voice a little hoarse, barely above a whisper. My thumb traced the intricate pattern on the key's head. This small piece of metal felt like a bridge to the past, a direct line to Arthur himself. With a slow, deliberate movement, I inserted the key into the lock. It slid in smoothly, a perfect fit, a small click echoing the years of unspoken mystery. The sound felt like the turning of a page, the beginning of a new chapter. Uncle Thomas leaned forward, curiosity eclipsing his earlier sorrow. "What do you think it is, son? Deeds? Jewels?" he muttered, his eyes wide. His question hung in the air, a reflection of everyone's unspoken thoughts. But for me, it wasn't about value. It was about connection, about finally understanding the last silent conversation Grandpa Arthur had initiated. I turned the key. There was a faint, satisfying clunk as the mechanism disengaged. The lid, now unlocked, seemed to beckon me forward. A deep breath. And then, with a slow, hesitant pull, I lifted the lid. The old wood creaked softly in protest, revealing the carefully guarded contents within. The wooden lid, now fully open, revealed not glittering jewels or stacks of crisp documents, but a collection of seemingly disparate objects nestled on a bed of faded velvet. My heart, which had been hammering with anticipation, now sank with a strange mix of confusion and slight disappointment. It wasn't the dramatic reveal Uncle Thomas had hinted at, nor the grand secret I'd half expected. Instead, the first thing my gaze landed on was a small, well-worn leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, secured with a thin, brittle string. Beside it, a cluster of old sepia-toned photographs, curled slightly at the edges, lay scattered. Beneath them, peeking out, was a neatly folded piece of aged parchment. A collective sigh, almost imperceptible, swept through the room. Aunt Eleanor's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Is that it?" she murmured, her voice laced with unconcealed disappointment, her eyes narrowing as she peered closer. Her earlier intensity morphed into a look of almost offended disbelief. It was clear she'd expected something of tangible, immediate value. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of unfulfilled expectations from everyone but me. I ignored them, my fingers already reaching for the journal. The leather felt soft, incredibly smooth, worn from countless hours in Grandpa Arthur's hands. It smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and the dry scent of old paper, a smell intimately tied to memories of his study. This wasn't a disappointment to me. This was Arthur. The journal felt like a direct line to him, more precious than any jewel. He was a man who wrote, who documented, who kept things. This felt right. "What is it, Michael?" Sarah asked, her voice softer, more understanding than Eleanor's. She leaned forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and a deep, empathetic sadness. She understood that for Arthur, value wasn't always monetary. Her gaze lingered on the journal, a silent acknowledgement of its potential significance. I gently lifted the journal. "It looks like a diary," I managed, my voice still a whisper, my eyes scanning the faded script on the first visible page. The handwriting was unmistakably his, neat and precise, but smaller than I remembered. The very first entry, half obscured by the string, began with a date, September 12th, 1955. My grandfather would have been a young man then, just starting his adult life. A new layer of mystery, deeper and more personal, was already beginning to unfold. Uncle Thomas cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with a shrug. "A diary? Well, I suppose that's something." "Rather cryptic of Arthur, wouldn't you say?" He offered a small, forced smile, clearly attempting to mask his own letdown. It was true, Arthur always had a flair for the dramatic in his quiet way. But this felt like an entirely different register. This wasn't about a hidden treasure. It was about a hidden life. Mr. Henderson, ever the picture of professional neutrality, interjected calmly. "As per the will, Michael, you are the sole recipient of the box's contents. You may examine them at your leisure. However, as it specifies contents, if there are any further instructions or requests within, it is advisable to make those known." His words, while legally sound, felt like a distant echo, drowned out by the immediate connection I felt to the weathered journal in my hands. My thumb traced the raised lettering on the journal's spine. This was not a random collection. This was a narrative, a secret history, perhaps even an explanation for the man I thought I knew. I glanced at the photographs. One showed a young Arthur, far younger than I'd ever seen him, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, a wide, genuine smile on his face. Another depicted a rugged, windswept landscape, a place utterly unfamiliar to me. These images, fragments of a forgotten time, begged for context. My mind raced, piecing together the possibilities, the new questions arising faster than the old ones could be answered. The key had opened a box, but the box, it seemed, had opened a door to an entirely different past. I gently opened the journal, its binding creaking softly, revealing brittle foxed pages and faded ink. This wasn't a ledger. It was lyrical, hinting at a small sun-drenched cottage, a place utterly foreign to our family stories. This wasn't the quiet Vermonter I knew. This was someone else entirely. A profound sense of disconnect, yet an equally deep curiosity settled over me. "Well?" Aunt Eleanor's sharp voice cut through the quiet, tapping her polished nail on the table. "Are you going to read it aloud, Michael? Or is this just for your private amusement?" Her tone implied I was deliberately withholding a fortune. I looked up. "It's private, Aunt Eleanor." "It seems to be Grandpa Arthur's personal journal from a long time ago. It's not what you're expecting." My voice was thin, a whisper against the tension. My mother, Sarah, placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Give him space, Eleanor. Arthur left it for Michael for a reason. He'll share what he deems appropriate." Her voice, soft but firm, was a quiet strength. She understood this wasn't about money, it was about legacy. Uncle Thomas, meanwhile, picked up one of the curled photographs. Interesting. This woman, she's not Grandma Helen, is she? And this landscape, Michael, where do you think this could be?" The photo showed a young woman with laughing eyes, her arm linked with a youthful Arthur, before towering rugged cliffs and a tempestuous sea. Certainly not Vermont. I took the photo. "No, it's not Grandma Helen. I've never seen this woman, or this place." A knot formed in my stomach. Who was she? Why had Arthur never spoken of her? This wasn't a casual snapshot. It was a profound, unsettling fragment of his hidden life, meticulously concealed. "Perhaps it's a youthful indiscretion," Aunt Eleanor scoffed, lips pursed, dismissing it. "Or just a travel diary. Arthur did travel, you know." She tried to sound nonchalant, but her eyes flicked constantly to the journal. "Arthur never traveled much after he married Helen," Sarah corrected quietly, her gaze fixed on the journal thoughtfully. "Not that I recall. And he was always so private about his younger years. This is a revelation." Her words resonated. The Arthur I knew was a creature of habit, rooted in Vermont. This journal hinted at a wilder, more adventurous youth he had meticulously hidden. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "While these items are fascinating, Michael, the will simply states, the contents of this box. There are no further instructions for their immediate disclosure. Your privacy is protected." His words provided a shield against Eleanor's probing. My gaze returned to the journal, then the photographs, and finally the aged parchment tucked beneath them, its edges crisp despite its age. The parchment seemed different, more formal, perhaps official. This wasn't just a collection of memories. It was a carefully constructed puzzle, and Arthur had given me all the pieces. The air, once thick with anticipation for treasure, now hummed with the quiet, profound weight of secrets waiting to be understood. My gaze shifted from the enigmatic journal and the haunting photographs to the neatly folded parchment, its texture different, crisper than the journal's aged pages. It felt substantial, holding a different kind of weight, not of personal memory, but of official record. My fingers, still trembling from the previous discoveries, gingerly unfolded it. The crisp crackle of the old paper echoed in the hushed room, a sound surprisingly loud in the thick silence. As the document unfurled, my eyes widened, fixating on the elegant formal script at the top. It wasn't a map, nor a deed to land. It was a marriage certificate. A suffocating wave of shock washed over me, rendering me utterly speechless. Dated August 14th, 1956, it bore Grandpa Arthur's full name, Arthur Pendleton Davies, intertwined with a name I'd never heard, Isolde Maeve Callahan. And below her name, a signature, unmistakably Arthur's, alongside another, more flowing, distinctly feminine hand. The knot in my stomach tightened, a cold, hard stone of disbelief. This wasn't just a youthful indiscretion, as Aunt Eleanor had scoffed. This was a legal binding union, a marriage, and Isolde Maeve Callahan was, without a shadow of a doubt, the laughing woman in the sepia photograph. A marriage certificate? Aunt Eleanor's voice, sharp and incredulous, pierced the quiet, shattering the fragile calm. She pushed her chair back, her eyes bulging. Arthur was married before Helen? Why, This is scandalous. Who is Isolde Maeve Callahan? Her face was a mask of outrage, clearly processing this revelation as a betrayal of family history, a stain on Arthur's carefully curated image. Her indignation filled the room, a stark contrast to my own quiet internal turmoil. My mother, Sarah, leaned forward, her hand flying to her mouth again, but this time in genuine astonishment. "Isolde," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a mix of confusion and profound sadness. "My father, he never mentioned another wife. Never." Her eyes, wide and searching, met mine, filled with unspoken questions. This was a direct challenge to her entire understanding of her father, the stoic, reliable man she had known and loved. Uncle Thomas, surprisingly, remained silent, his earlier jovial curiosity replaced by a stunned, thoughtful expression. He simply stared at the document in my hands, a slow realization dawning on his face. The air in the room crackled with tension, thick with the weight of this unforeseen secret. The pleasant scent of old paper and dust now seemed to carry a bittersweet tang of untold stories, of lives lived in shadow. "Mr. Henderson," I managed, my voice hoarse, pointing to the parchment, "is this legal? Was this a valid marriage?" My mind reeled. Grandpa Arthur had been married to Grandma Helen for over 50 years, a union that had seemed like the bedrock of our family. This document, so casually revealed, completely upended that foundation. It was like finding a secret room in the house where you'd lived your whole life, a room that held a life completely unknown. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, his professional demeanor unwavering, though I detected a subtle shift in his posture, a slight tightening of his lips. "The document appears to be fully valid, Michael," he stated calmly, his gaze sweeping over the family members before settling back on me. "Issued in the state of Maine, signed by a justice of the peace. As per the date, it would have preceded his marriage to your grandmother Helen by some years." His words, delivered with detached legal precision, felt like hammers striking a fragile glass. "Maine?" I murmured, my thoughts racing. But Grandpa Arthur was always from Vermont. He never spoke of Maine. The unknown landscape in the photographs, the rugged cliffs and the tempestuous sea, now clicked into place with chilling clarity. It was a coastline, perhaps the wild, untamed shores of Maine. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and meaningless, were suddenly beginning to form a picture, but a picture I never imagined. This wasn't just a secret. It was a profound, life-altering secret that had been buried for decades. What kind of man had my quiet, predictable grandfather truly been? And why had he guarded this immense truth so fiercely? The silent weight of his hidden life pressed down on me, demanding answers I didn't yet possess. The revelation of Isolde's name on that certificate struck me physically. The air crackled with accusations and decades of silence. My grandfather, the family's stoic rock, harbored a monumental secret. It redefined everything. How could he live such a lie? "Maine," Sarah whispered, voice raw with betrayal. She stared at the certificate, then at me, eyes clouded. "My whole life. I thought I knew him. He never mentioned Helen. Was it a love he left behind?" Her question hung heavy, a desperate plea. Aunt Eleanor, indignant, declared, "Outrageous. Arthur, known for honesty, to conceal a marriage? Unfathomable. What did he gain? Helen deserved to know." Uncle Thomas, however, quietly observed Isolde's photograph. "She looks happy," he mused. "Arthur, too. Perhaps a wound too deep to speak of, Eleanor." His words offered empathetic contrast. My gaze drifted from parchment to journal, then to the sepia photographs. Isolde, with bright, laughing eyes, looked so alive. This wasn't a fling. It was a shared life, profoundly erased. I felt an ache for Isolde and the young Arthur I was just knowing. "The journal," I whispered, pulling my eyes from the certificate. "This must explain everything." My fingers, guided, reached for the leather-bound book. The certificate was a fact. The journal promised truth. Why the secret? What happened to Isolde? Questions clawed. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Indeed, Michael. The will directs all contents to you. The journal may hold answers." He gestured. His calm was a ballast, yet his eyes held curiosity. My family's gaze pressed down, impatience, sorrow, intense curiosity. Mother's eyes fixed on the journal with desperate hope. She needed answers to reconcile her adored father. This wasn't just a secret. It was a rewriting of our origins, a shadow cast. I picked up the journal, its weight grounding me. It felt like a key to a hidden chamber in Arthur's soul. The parchment, photos, key, an overture. His life's real symphony lay within these fragile pages. An unsettling feeling washed over me. What if the truth was more painful? Better undisturbed? Everyone waited for me to turn the next page, to unravel Arthur Pendleton Davies's life. My fingers, still tingling from the revelation of the marriage certificate, gently parted the ancient covers of the journal. The first few pages were a whirlwind of meticulous script, Arthur's distinct hand detailing dates, weather, and mundane observations. But then, as I turned to September 12th, 1955, the narrative shifted, the ink growing bolder, more urgent. It was the entry directly corresponding to the date on the photograph where he stood beside Isolde. My breath hitched. He wrote of a storm-lashed coast, a chance encounter during a furious gale that had trapped him in a small fishing village in Maine. He described a woman, Isolde, with eyes the color of a stormy sea and a spirit just as wild. My grandfather, the quiet Vermonter, had found his tempest. He wrote poetry here. I whispered, my voice thick with awe, reading aloud a fragmented line. Her laughter, a buoy in the crashing waves. Sarah gasped softly beside me, tears welling in her eyes. My father? A poet? She murmured, a profound wonder in her tone. It was a side of Arthur she, and none of us, had ever known. The room was utterly silent now, even Eleanor's usual sharp critiques hushed by the sheer weight of this intimate confession. This wasn't just a record, it was a love story, raw and untamed. The entries that followed painted a vivid picture of a swift, passionate romance. Arthur, always so reserved, wrote of being utterly captivated by Isolde, a free spirit who lived by the ocean, her life intertwined with its rhythms. He detailed their walks along rugged cliffs, the scent of salt spray on the wind, the taste of freshly caught lobster. He spoke of shared dreams, of building a life together far from the structured world he'd known. This wasn't simply a young man's infatuation. It was a foundational, life-altering connection that vibrated with every word he penned. Her voice, I read, my voice barely audible, was the song of the sea itself, pulling me further from the shore of my past. Uncle Thomas leaned forward, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine fascination. He seemed to shrink, absorbing the enormity of this hidden narrative. He truly loved her, Michael, he said, his voice surprisingly soft. You can feel it in the words? Eleanor, too, remained uncharacteristically quiet, her gaze fixed on the worn pages, perhaps seeing a glimpse of a different Arthur, one she couldn't categorize or dismiss. The narrative continued through their quick courtship, culminating in the marriage certificate I held. Arthur wrote of their wedding day, a small, intimate affair overlooking the tumultuous ocean, a stark contrast to the traditional, larger ceremony he would later have with Grandma Helen. His joy leaped from the pages, a vibrant, almost painful energy. He spoke of Isolde's wild beauty, her infectious laughter, her unwavering belief in him. It was a love so pure, so all-encompassing, it made my chest ache with a bittersweet understanding. Then, abruptly, the tone of the journal shifted. The vibrant descriptions of the coast faded, replaced by shorter, more somber entries. The dates grew more spaced out. There was a noticeable hesitation in Arthur's usually steady hand. My heart began to pound with a sickening dread, anticipating the inevitable turn. What could have shattered such profound happiness? The earlier entry of a looming shadow felt more ominous than ever. What happened, Michael? Sarah whispered, her voice tight with apprehension, her hand reaching for mine, tracing the lines of the journal. She sensed the impending sorrow, the dark cloud that had obscured this radiant part of her father's history. The air, once thick with revelation, now became heavy with a profound sadness, like a storm gathering just off the coast. I turned a page and the handwriting became almost illegible, scrawled as if in haste or despair. The entry was dated just a little over a year after their marriage. The fever took her, I read aloud, my voice cracking, swift as a squall. My Isolde, gone. The light in my world extinguished. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Eleanor covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Uncle Thomas simply bowed his head. The full, devastating truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. Isolde hadn't left him. Death had stolen her. The next few pages were almost empty, save for a few smudged lines, a raw primal scream of grief. Arthur had lost the love of his life, a love so profound he had sealed it away, preserving it in this private journal, far from the judgments and casual curiosity of the world. The ocean, which had been the backdrop to their love, became a symbol of his crushing loss, its endless roar echoing his silent despair. He spoke of leaving Maine, of the impossibility of staying in a place so steeped in her memory. He had come home to Vermont, but a part of him, the vibrant, poetic, wild part, had remained forever on that windswept coast with Isolde Maeve Callahan. I closed the journal gently, its weight suddenly immense in my hands. The silence that followed was absolute, filled only with the faint echo of Arthur's unspoken sorrow. There were no more questions, no more demands for explanation. Only a shared, profound understanding of the man we thought we knew. The key had not unlocked a material treasure, but an immeasurable, heartbreaking truth, a love story buried, cherished, and finally shared. The silence stretched, not empty, but resonant with Arthur's untold story. It wasn't a silence of absence, but of presence, a profound echo of love and loss that permeated the room, touching each of us in a different way. My hand still rested on the journal, feeling the faint warmth of the worn leather, a tangible link to a man more complex, more vulnerable than I had ever known. His carefully guarded grief, locked away for decades, was now, paradoxically, our shared inheritance. It wasn't the fortune Eleanor had hoped for, but something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of the human heart. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers gently covering mine on the journal. Her eyes, still glistening, held a newfound tenderness. "He loved her so much," she whispered, her voice fragile, as if speaking a sacred truth. "My father. He carried that all his life." There was no judgment, only an overwhelming sorrow for the burden he had borne alone. Aunt Eleanor, uncharacteristically subdued, simply nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, perhaps for the young Arthur she hadn't known, or for the secrets we all carry. Even Uncle Thomas looked away, lost in his own thoughts, the weight of the story evident in his slumped shoulders. Mr. Henderson, ever composed, cleared his throat, breaking the spell, but gently. "It seems, then," he began, his voice softer than before, "that Mr. Davies's final wishes have been fulfilled. The true nature of this inheritance is clear." He didn't elaborate, nor did he need to. The room understood. The legal formalities felt distant now, irrelevant in the face of such raw, personal history. The will was a conduit, not an end. I looked at the sepia photographs one last time. Isolde's vibrant smile, caught in time, seemed to meet my gaze, a silent acknowledgement across the decades. She was no longer just a name on a certificate, but a vital, radiant woman who had shaped my grandfather's soul. The wild coastline in the background felt less like a distant place and more like a landscape of the heart, a testament to a love that defied time and silence. It was a love story that had, in its own quiet way, endured. The key, still in my pocket, felt lighter now, its purpose fulfilled. It hadn't just opened a box. It had unlocked a chamber of shared memory, a forgotten chapter in our family's narrative. Grandpa Arthur, the stoic man of few words, had, in his passing, offered the most eloquent explanation of all. He had trusted me, a quiet whisper across time, to bear witness to his greatest joy and deepest sorrow. And in doing so, he had woven his hidden love story into the very fabric of who we were, a thread of unexpected beauty and resilience. The room remained quiet, a sanctuary for a truth finally revealed, a secret given air to breathe. And in that stillness, I felt his presence, not as a ghost, but as a silent echo of a life fully, albeit privately, lived.